Hi, it's Mark back with another Photoshop tutorial, and today we're going to be looking at the history brush in Photoshop. And I know what you're thinking. There's a history brush in Photoshop. Yes, there is a history brush in Photoshop. Is it any good? It has its uses, so we're going to be looking at those uses today. And to help us, we've got this picture here from Petra, and we've got this picture here from Ramin, both of which came from Unsplash, and they're sitting in a zip file on my website waiting for you to download should you want to play along at the same time. And I've put the link to that zip file down below in the comments. If you hear the door go, I'm out here, by the way, because I'm waiting on a delivery. My 5-year-old Wacom Intuos Pro Small is finally on its way out, and I'm getting delivery of a brand new Wacom Intuos Pro Medium together with the new version of the pen. Using a tablet really speeds up workflow and is so much better than a mouse. If you want to see why and how I set mine up, I've got a link to a video which I'll put above now, and you can go and check that out. In the meantime, however, there's a download waiting for you on my website should you want to follow along, and so press the pause button or be very quick. We only have 8 seconds of titles before we start. See you shortly. I guess a good place to start would get an understanding of what history is, apart from the fact that it's kind of obvious. So let's just take Petra's picture here and just start doing some bits and bobs with it. It doesn't really matter what I'm doing with it at the moment. I'm just banking up some changes just to show you. So we'll put vibrance on first, then we might go and put a curves adjustment layer on and pick one of the default ones to get it to a bit lighter. And then I might put a levels on to take the mids just a little bit over to the dark side, like that. And then possibly a hue and saturation layer on, and just pop the saturation just a little bit as well. So there you are, I've made a series of changes to this picture. Not important what they are. And you know that you can do Control Z or Command Z on a Mac. So if I do that, and it will get rid of the last change, which is so take out the saturation adjustment there. If I do it again, it takes out the saturation layer itself. And if I come up to edit, I can redo, put the layer in, and if you watch the saturation slider, I can edit and redo that, so it's Control Z and Shift Control Z, or the back and forward through your changes, through your history no less. However, another way of doing this, what if you wanted to go straight back to the vibrance? I've made an adjustment on the hue and saturation, so that's 1. Get rid of the hue and saturation, that's 2. I made an adjustment on the levels, that's 3. Get rid of the levels, that's 4. I made an adjustment on the curves, that's 5. And get rid of the curves is 6. So I have 6 Control Zs and I'm back to vibrance. Whereas, if I kept an eye on my history, which if you don't see it already, it's Windows History, you can see them. And if I wanted to go back to vibrance, I'm back at vibrance. If I want to go back to where I modified the vibrance, there you are. If I want to go to where the levels change was, after I made the change, anyway, you can jump back and forward far more readily in history. That is one of the good uses of history, one of the excellent uses of history. We'll come to the brush a little bit later. However, you are limited to how many of these you can use. That limit is set in preferences, and I fell foul of this a long while ago, and so I've changed it. So in preferences, performance, there's a section over here which is how many history states, and I don't know what the default was, but it certainly was a lot lower than 100. I've now got 100 levels, and I do need that level sometimes when I'm doing my digital work, such as this picture of this watercolour and ink artwork of Newcastle bridges with the sunset. There's an awful lot of layers and adjustments went into making that. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, so we've got this. Another good thing is, let's say I'm really happy with where I am at the moment, and before I move on, I would normally, ignoring history, come here and do Command Option Shift and E, or Control Alt Shift and E, and that gives me a stamp layer on top, which is an emerging of all of the layers below. And then I could soldier on, do more changes. perhaps I wanted to leave that as my checkpoint and revisit the hue and saturation and take it down a little bit more, and that applies to that stamp layer because that's a solid layer, no masks on it. So this, you always read your layers from top to bottom. They flow down from top to bottom. Your masks either let things through or don't, depending on whether you're masking things in or masking things out. But that's by the by. Here we've got a dead stop and we've applied hue and saturation, and I could soldier on and possibly put another layer in. But you can also take checkpoints, if you like, or snapshots in your history. So let's say I'm happy so far with this. Then if I click on the little camera here, it puts a snapshot in there, snapshot 1. And let's make some more changes. I wanted to apply a photo filter and put a warming look on the thing. Let's significantly change it, shall we? To put a cooling look on. We've put that in there, and I'm happy with that so far. Or I might want to go back to it. I can take another snapshot. And now in my history, without having to do stamp layers, let's get rid of that layer, I can actually go to snapshot 2, snapshot 1, original document, snapshot 1, and go to where I modified the levels control, or where I first put a photo filter in. So you can move around and preserve snapshots and your history. That is a very good tool to have. So I'm going to get rid of all that, and then we're going to actually have a look at what the brush does. Bear with me while I just close this and reload it, just so I've got absolutely nothing set that we didn't have from the copy you've got that you may have downloaded. A traditional brush, be from a brush tool, uses the colour from the colour picker, so let's make a red, to apply the ink, for want of a better word, or the brush strokes or the pen strokes to your diagram. So the source is a colour. The history brush uses a point in history as a colour, and the point in history that is used is pixel for pixel. I will show you this because it is far easier than trying to put it into words. So let's take a copy of this layer, Control or Command J. Let's rename it to our colour exploits, and let's go and stick something garish on it, a colour lookup. Why not go for the old teal and orange? Teal and orange, by the way, can be a very effective colour combination. It's used in a lot of movies as well. Once your eye finds it, you keep spotting it in all sorts of movies. I've got a video about teal and orange, including a free preset, which I will link to above. But please bear with this one first. I'm going to take the opacity of this down a bit. I would normally put these into a different blend mode, but I wanted to make it a little bit more obvious, so I'm just going to do that. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go and go back to our colour exploits, and I'm going to go and grab the dodge tool. So dodge lightens things, bring the exposure down a little bit, leave it on mid-tones. I'm going to use this just to lighten the peaks on this grass layer. Just rolled over some of the peaks, just generally. Don't worry about the fact that I'm doing this all in one layer and it doesn't look very good at the moment. Have faith, young Jedi. And I'm also going to swap this over to my burn tool. Incidentally, I've got a tutorial on dodging and burning, which I will link to above now. And so the burning is going to darken, so I want to darken this trench a little bit, which has been caused by it looks like tyre tracks. Just to get a nice sweeping line going up, cutting that picture, taking us up into the distance, and I'm going to darken off the hills there and some of the fall side of these ridges, and then with a little bit of a big out brush I'm going to put a bit of a vignette on this. Alright, so that's a massively quick bit of editing on this picture, not necessarily to my taste, but it's just to demonstrate something. And there they all are in our history. So we're going to use this as our source. This is going to be our ink. So I'm going to make a snapshot, and there it is. Now, the snapshot, I'll put a click next to it, and that is our history brush. As you can see over here, the icon for the history brush, we've just put it there. So we're saying this is our source of, in inverted commas, ink. And I want to apply it to when I first made the copy of the layer and the name changed. So as soon as I click, running back on here, as soon as I click on there, I undo all that, and I've gone back in history to that point. But my brush is loaded with this snapshot. So now, there's my history brush. If I brush, and I'll bring the flow down a little bit. If I brush in here, you can see straight away that it's actually brought through the source, which was a bit of burning. And if I brush here, it starts to bring through a bit of dodging. And if I brush the entire sky, it brings through a little bit of that overall colour change that we made. Let's get the flow up there. So now I can click off, none. The sky's not so much changed, but you can see how that's brought that in using the history brush. And what's more, we've actually got those levels there. So, you know, oh, I didn't really like that. Let's go back to start that bit again and click back in history, because it's still the same old back and forward in history, irrespective of the brush. And we'll start again. So I'm going to take my flow right down. And I didn't like bringing out the dodge after all, so I'm just going to stick with sticking some of the very small highlights in here. Right down the front there. And what am I brushing in? I'm brushing in the point in history, that snapshot where I'd applied all those changes. And the advantage of this over other things is once you've built up, you could build up a whole stack of changes, and then you want to bring them in and out as one. Then through history, you can make a snapshot. I can do exactly that. I hope that makes sense. Demonstration is easier, but let's do another example to really cement it home. And here we're going to use this portrait from Ramin, and we're going to use to add a bit of dodging and burning and a bit of texture work on the skin. So first things first, I'm just going to zoom in there. So there was a knock on the door, hence the slight splice in this video, and I've now the owner of my new Wacom Intuos Pro Medium, and it is so much better than the previous one. It feels slicker, the pen feels nicer, and the actual real estate, the amount of surface area I've got to draw with to map my screen is much bigger than the small tablet I had. But the physical tablet itself is only about 2 centimeters bigger. Anyway, that's me doing nothing this afternoon and playing. But back to here, what we're going to do. Right, so we're going to do a touch up here, and we want to possibly blur the skin a little bit just to take some of the texture out there. Now, if you were doing a retouch, I wouldn't advocate this as the method to do it. Remember that what we said was it's convenient with your history to take snapshots occasionally, and there's more than one way of doing that, so you can actually go back to it as well as jumping into the individual layers of your history. So if you are happy and you've made a snapshot, but then you decide you want to tone some of it down after all, but that snapshot was across, say, 12 different changes, 3 or 4 different adjustment layers, then it's hard to actually balance that. So this technique allows you to say, right, I'm now going to make a snapshot which becomes my painting source. I'm going to go back in history and I'm going to paint back on the sum of those changes. So let's do something here. I'm going to take a copy, Control or Command J. I'm going to use our Gaussian or G-Blur to take some of the texture away from the skin. I think we've got about 5. Now, when you watch videos on people blurring and doing things like touch-ups, don't take the numbers they give you for gospel unless you're following along with the picture they have provided, because 5 pixel blur on this image, and this image could, let's say this image is 1,000 pixels wide, then a 5 pixel blur has a different impact as if this picture were 10,000 pixels wide. So don't take the actual values on things like this for gospel. Use your eye unless you're actually going along with supplied pictures, in which case it should map correctly. So we've got that blur in there, and we can do a little bit of dodging and burning. So here's our tools over here. I think what I want to do here is try and introduce a burn, keep the exposure down in the mids, and I just want to gently come down the half of the face. I just want to darken more this side to make it look like it's more in shadow. So we'll just do that. But I also want to use the dodge tool, which is the brightening tool, and get a bit more on the cheekbones, I think, and down that side of the nose as a complementary thing. Take this push down a little bit more, a bit wider, and just sweep that side of the forehead a little bit. And with that same settings, let's go back to the burn, baby burn, and just bring a little bit more down in here. So there you go. I've made a bunch of changes. So if we go to a history brush, you will see those. Sorry, if we go to a history, you will see those. And we take our snapshot. So there's a snapshot. And by clicking here, we are saying to the history brush when we use it, this is the source. This is the paint that I want to use. Pixel for pixel on that layer is going to be painted through into this layer. But now we have to unpick the changes, which is just a case of going back down through our history to the place where we started making changes, which was adding the blur. I'm going to click there. So there is our original picture on display, or so it seems. I'll just put that to one side, and we've got our snapshot as our source. So Y is the shortcut key for the history brush, and there it is. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to leave the floor quite low, and I'm just going to paint in, because that blur was a bit heavier than what I wanted. So by doing this, I'm not painting as much of it back in. Bring this down a bit, but I do want to paint it a little bit more in where there were some more lines. And down there. When I'm actually doing retouching, I never want to take all of it out anyway. In fact, I wouldn't necessarily alter the skin much, to tell you the truth. I prefer being more true to the form, and I do retouches to get rid of zits. There, and make it a bit bigger, and bring the floor back up for the burn elements we put in down this side. Alright, so before and after. You get the idea. A little bit too bright there, so I'm going to bring this down. Too much of a transition, I need to make it a bit more brighter than before and after. So there you go, there's one way of doing it. This isn't a lesson in touch-up, this is a lesson of showing you how to use your history brush, how to select any particular point and save it as the source for your painting. With that said, I think I will call it a day on that one. I hope you found it useful. There's certainly some good things you need to do about increasing the amount of your history, understanding how history itself works and how it can save you an awful lot of time leapfrogging over that. And whether you're using the history brush or not, it's always good practice to periodically put a snapshot in, whether that's a stamp layer with Command Option Shift and E, or Control Alt Shift and E, as I've already demonstrated, or indeed through snapshots in your history panel itself. So good editing and I'll see you again on the next video. Bye now.